Now we've got the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in North Carolina, Cheri Beasley. Thank you so much for coming on.
Brian, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So how's the race looking so far? Can you give a snapshot of where everything stands fewer than 2 months out now?
You know, I'm really excited about where we are in this race. We have a lot of enthusiasm in North Carolina. This is a people-powered campaign and really excited. I'm so thankful that, we are reaching out to folks all over the state. 100 counties, we've visited all of them and hearing from them about why they're really concerned in this election cycle. And we're touching folks. We're knocking doors and texting and note card writing and all of that, and really seeing a lot of energy and support in this race.
North Carolina is a swing state that had been trending red in recent years. And granted, with the Democrats, while that outlook has gotten better in recent months, thanks to legislative wins and obviously the Supreme Court overturning Roe, midterms for the party in power are still traditionally, a tough sell. So how do you overcome both those traditional barriers and North Carolina's inching to the right?
I think it really is. Having won 2 statewide elections, thankfully, for the people in our state, 2 contested statewide elections. And we're really building upon those relationships in this election cycle. And there is a lot of enthusiasm. Certainly the Dobbs decision has had some impact on this race. And, there are people who are afraid about that decision and really want to know that the next senator is going to fight hard to lower costs, but that she will also fight hard to protect our constitutional rights. And that's exactly what I'm committed to. And my opponent, on the other hand, Congressman Ted Budd, has been very clear that he supports an absolute ban on abortion, even in the cases of rape, incest, or risk to a mother's health. And that's completely out of step with where people are in North Carolina and across this country.
That's a good segue into this question. I'm wondering what's the most resonant issue with North Carolinians? Because, I know North Carolina isn't California or New York. So what works best in terms of reaching out to voters in your state?
I think it's fair to say we are the 9th largest state in the nation, where about a third of the folks who live there earn less than $15 an hour. And so many people are working 2 and 3 jobs to take care of their families. And one of the primary issues really is rising costs. People are feeling everything from the pain at the pump to, even though gas prices are coming down some, to prescription drug costs and everything in between. And so it's important to talk about that and to listen to folks about how critical these issues are for them, and to commit to making sure that we're fighting hard to lower costs. My opponent, on the other hand, has been very clear where his allegiance is. Congressman Budd, in every opportunity to vote in favor of the interests of people in North Carolina, has voted against us. And he, in fact, has taken corporate PAC money from Big Pharma and voted against lowering prescription drug costs. He has taken corporate PAC money from big oil companies and voted against lowering gas prices. And he and his family farm have bankrupted farmers to the tune of about $50 million in North Carolina and across this country. So his interests are clear, which are corporate and special interests and not the interests of the people in North Carolina.
Now, what about the issue of Roe? And we touched upon this earlier, but how has Roe changed the electorate? Because prior to Roe, it was pretty easy to fit people into boxes based on age, on socioeconomic status, on income and race. How has Roe changed all of that in North Carolina as you've seen so far on the campaign trail?
I think it's fair to say that I've been a judge for over 2 decades, and I know that for nearly 50 years, North Carolinians in this country enjoyed a constitutionally protected right to make their own healthcare decisions and reproductive freedom without government interference. And so to see that the court has now taken this constitutional right and freedom away is jolting for a lot of folks. And I do believe it's the kind of issue that galvanizes all of us across the state, as diverse as the state is. We're urban and rural and exurban and Black, white, Native American, and people get it. The majority of North Carolinians really do support making Roe the law. And just the other night, I had a grandfather call me and tell me that he was really afraid for his granddaughters and what this court's decision means for them and for all of us. And so I'm fully committed to fighting hard to protect our constitutional freedoms and respecting the rule of law. And my opponent has been very clear that he won't do that.
Has there been any softening of his stance now that he's pivoting into the general, like we've seen from other candidates for Senate across the country?
You know, I don't know to the extent to which he is talking about these kinds of things, but, you know, we know where he stands with big pharma and big oil and corporations and special interests. We know where he stands on an absolute ban on abortion, even in exceptional cases of rape, incest, or risk to a mother's health. And so we know where he stands on reproductive freedom. And I don't know him, but I do know that actions speak louder than words. And I know that when people show you who they are, you better believe him. And he just does not speak for North Carolinians or for people in this country.
Can you speak a little bit about what's at stake more broadly from a national perspective if Ted Budd were to win this race, if Republicans were more broadly to be able to take the Senate?
You know, I think for people in North Carolina, this really is about having a senator who's going to be an advocate, who stands up for what we care about in our state, and for every opportunity, Congressman Budd has had to vote for us. He has voted against us on lowering gas prices. He's voted against us on lowering prescription drugs, and on affordable health care access, and he's voted against our farmers' interests, and agriculture is a top industry in North Carolina. He voted against the CHIPS legislation, which allows us to make our own semiconductors in North Carolina. And he's turned his back on our veterans. And North Carolina has the highest number of veterans per capita in the country. And we have lots of veterans who've been exposed to toxic burn pits and contaminated water, and they need our support. And I think we have a duty to make sure that we're looking out for our veterans. They've certainly fulfill their duty to us. And we need a senator who's going to stand for what's right, that she will call out what's wrong, and that she will lead courageously.
And by the way, just the irony of having to do that, of having Democrats have to tell Republicans that they should do that after years and years and years of grandstanding about how important it was to support the troops. And then when push comes to shove and it's time to finally put their money where their mouth is, it's just Democrats who are going to vote to push funding forward through the PACT Act, for example, to actually get these veterans health care. North Carolina Republicans for the last decade have been among the most anti-democratic in the nation. Like, North Carolina had one of, if not the worst gerrymanders in the entire United States. So how have you been relaying the danger of a party that has shown us, that has broadcast that it doesn't care about fair representation?
Well, I think for all of the many issues that impact people in North Carolina, whether we're talking about lowering costs or protecting voting rights or reproductive freedom, or making sure that we're bringing good paying jobs to North Carolina, or the climate crisis, it is important for folks to realize that these really are not partisan issues. I mean, if you don't have access to affordable health care, doesn't matter whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. If it's you or someone you love who can't afford your prescription drugs and you're missing doses and splitting pills, doesn't matter whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent, or don't have access to clean air or clean water. I mean, these are not partisan issues. And I think so many people in North Carolina really are tired of the pettiness of partisan politics and just want to know that the next senator is going to commit to serving all of North Carolina. And that is my commitment. We won't see that out of Congressman Ted Budd. I mean, he's been in the Congress for 6 years, and he's had every opportunity to show us what he's made of, and he's failed to do that. Or actually, he has. He's shown us that he's going to support corporate and special interests, but he's not going to stand up for North Carolina.
Yeah, and even just more broadly, like we've already seen, when you take the legislative achievements of the past Republican administration, where the biggest legislative accomplishment was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, versus everything that's been passed now, from the American Rescue Plan to the infrastructure package to the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS, PACT, and obviously adding 10 million jobs and whatnot. So I think those are especially clear. And we've even heard from Kevin McCarthy, and I know that's in the House and you're running for the Senate, but we've heard from Kevin McCarthy that if the Republicans are able to take the majority in Congress, that their priority is going to be investigations into Hunter Biden and whatever other Fox News fever dream they've been served up by Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. So,
well, I think you wonderfully make the point that that it's important to be focused on legislation that works for people in this country and in North Carolina, and not creating division.
Just fighting some culture war.
There's too much at stake, and people really are looking for someone who's going to take this job seriously, and Congressman Butt is just not the one. He is extreme, and folks should know that.
What do you say to an independent or a Republican who may have never voted for a Democrat before, but who sees that Republicans are leveraging their attacks against democracy or their attacks against women's reproductive rights and basically can't stomach it? Like, how do you get someone in the center and the right who is maybe going to stay home to instead come out and vote for you?
Well, I do hope that people realize that these issues really are not partisan, that North Carolina needs a senator who's not afraid to fight and to stand up for what's right for our state, but also that we have to be thinking about today, but we also have to be thinking about the next generations. And none of us want the next generations to have fewer constitutional freedoms or fewer opportunities. We are all working so hard. And I think the other piece about that is, really, regardless of party affiliation, most of us share common values around caring about our families and are working hard in our communities and making sure that our institutions are strong. We all want a strong economy, and we want to know that the next senator is going to fight hard for that. And what I know is that we really can be united. And this country has faced some real challenges. And what we know is that when we're challenged, that we really can be united even when we disagree. And constructive disagreement actually makes us stronger. So we should not listen to pundits and naysayers about what our core values are. And we should really want to know that the next senator from North Carolina shares our values around hard work and faith and integrity and doing what's best for our state and our country.
Have you had any encounters with Republicans, for example, on the campaign trail that have been especially memorable?
I have. The fact that they are a part of our events speaks volumes. And the fact that they do see that we must be committed to fighting for the state and for our country and for our future. But the grandfather that I talked about earlier is a Republican who's worried about his granddaughters. And for him, it's not a partisan issue. It's a family issue. And it does make sense to me that for people who care about our state and our country, that we're able to and really have an obligation to look past party to make sure that our senators are making decisions that work for us. And right now, the Senate is not working for North Carolina.
Are you satisfied with the attention that North Carolina's gotten, that the North Carolina Senate race has gotten so far amid all of the other midterm races?
I'm very thankful that we have a lot of energy in the state for sure. And people, across the country really understand why North Carolina is so important. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful that there really is a lot of energy, that people are excited, that we're feeling a real groundswell in movement and engagement in the state. And that's exactly what it's going to take to be successful in this race. And I'll also say that, we know what we're doing is working. I mean, Ted Budd and his allies have long since started spending millions of dollars to distort my judicial record. And they don't do that unless they know that we can win this race and that they really can lose.
How was your time on the court? How has that informed the campaign that you're running now? Like, has there been a specific catalyst or something that's worried you or energized you more than anything else that's caused you to run?
Having served as a judge for over 2 decades and serving as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina, I know that Washington really has failed families in North Carolina. And as Chief Justice, I worked really hard to start our first human trafficking court to make sure that we were protecting victims and holding traffickers accountable, address the school to prison pipeline to keep our students in our classrooms and not our courtrooms, and also created the first paid family leave policy for the judicial branch to make sure that our employees could balance work and family. And it's important for the next senator to be engaged and to think about leadership in those terms. And it's also really important to have a respect for the rule of law and the Constitution. I certainly did that as a judge, and I'll certainly do that as a senator.
Now, let's finish off with this. How can we best help your campaign?
Well, I do hope that people will go to my website, cheribeasley.com, for more information. But I would ask that people be engaged, that we would love to have them join us. There are ways in which they can be engaged without ever leaving their homes, and certainly we'd love to have them come to North Carolina if they have a chance to do that. But we are the best ambassadors for good, right? And so as people talk about the importance of this race, it's important that we talk with our colleagues and the people in our civic groups and our faith groups and everybody around us so that we know that this race is important for North Carolina, but it's also really important for the nation. So we'd love to have folks join Team Beasley. If they go to my website, they can certainly do that.
Cheri Beasley, thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Ryan. What a pleasure.